Daniel Carter's car pulled into the community center parking lot on Christmas Eve, his 10-year-old son Ethan beside him, when his headlights revealed something that made his heart stop. 3 figures huddled against a brick wall in the freezing cold. What he thought was just shadows turned out to be something far more heartbreaking. A young mother and her twin daughters, 7 years old, trembling, desperate, and starving. "Please," the woman whispered when Daniel approached, her voice breaking. "My girls. They haven't eaten in 2 days. I don't know what else to do. Dad, look." The words were barely a whisper, but they stopped Daniel Carter's hand mid-reach for the car door handle. His 10-year-old son, Ethan, a bright-eyed black boy with a close-cropped fade, was staring out the passenger window, his breath fogging the glass in the freezing December air. Daniel followed his son's gaze across the community center parking lot. 3 figures huddled against the brick wall of the adjacent building, a woman and 2 small children pressed together like they were trying to become one person. Their thin coats were no match for the bitter Michigan wind that whipped through the empty street, carrying tiny crystals of snow that stung like needles. Daniel, a tall black man in his mid-30s with warm brown skin and kind eyes, felt something tighten in his chest. Christmas Eve, freezing temperatures, and a mother trying to shield her babies from the cold with nothing but her own body. "Stay in the car for a minute, buddy." He didn't wait for Ethan's response. Daniel was already moving, popping the trunk, grabbing the wool blanket he kept for emergencies and the bag of canned goods they'd brought to donate. His worn boots crunched against the icy pavement as he approached slowly, carefully, not wanting to startle them. The woman looked up. Even in the dim glow of the flickering streetlight, Daniel could see the weariness in her dark brown eyes, exhausted, desperate, but still protective. She was a beautiful black woman who couldn't have been more than 30, with natural hair pulled back into a frayed bun and deep brown skin that looked ashen from the cold. The 2 little girls pressed against her sides were identical twins, maybe 7 years old, with thick curly hair in disheveled puffs and faces pinched with cold and hunger. "I'm sorry to bother you," Daniel said gently, stopping a few feet away. He held up the blanket. "I'm Daniel. I was just dropping something off at the center and I thought, you need this blanket and some food. Please take them." Daniel turned and waved Ethan over. His son was already out of the car, coat unzipped before Daniel could finish the gesture. Ethan jogged over and without a word, without being asked, he took off his winter jacket and draped it carefully over the smaller twins' shoulders. "I'm Ethan," he said, his voice gentle in a way that made Daniel's throat tighten. "What's your name?" "Grace," the little girl stammered through chattering teeth. "And I'm Lily," her sister added quietly. "Come on," Ethan said, reaching out his hand to Grace. "It's really warm inside, and Mr. Lewis makes the best hot chocolate." The community center's heating system rattled and hummed, but it worked. That was what mattered. Daniel led them through the dimly lit hallway to the common room where Mr. Lewis, an elderly black man with silver hair and a gentle demeanor who'd worked at the center for 30 years, was adjusting a space heater in the corner. "Mr. Lewis, these folks need some warmth and maybe something to eat," Daniel said quietly. "Can you help?" Mr. Lewis looked at the mother and the twins, and his weathered face softened immediately. "Of course," he said, his voice gruff but kind. Sit down. I'll be right back." The woman, Rachel, Daniel would soon learn, sank onto the worn couch like her legs had finally given out. Grace and Lily pressed against her sides, still shivering despite the warmth beginning to seep into their small bodies. Daniel wrapped the blanket around all 3 of them, tucking it gently around the twins' shoulders. "Thank you," Rachel whispered, her voice breaking. She kept saying it like it was the only phrase she remembered. Ethan sat cross-legged on the floor in front of the twins, pulling a quarter from his pocket. "Want to see a magic trick?" he asked, trying to coax a smile from them. Mr. Lewis returned with a tray, steaming mugs of hot chocolate, thick sandwiches, and a plate of cookies shaped like stars and Christmas trees. Daniel watched as Rachel's hands shook when she reached for the food. She handed sandwiches to Grace and Lily first, waiting until they'd taken their first bites before allowing herself even a sip of hot chocolate. The twins ate slowly at first, as if they weren't sure the food was real. Then hunger took over, and they ate with the desperate intensity of children who hadn't had a proper meal in days. Daniel moved to a bench across the room with Ethan, giving them space but staying close enough to help if needed. He studied Rachel as she carefully wiped Grace's face with a napkin, as she whispered encouragement to Lily to drink more hot chocolate, as she made sure her daughters had everything they needed before taking a bite of her own sandwich. A mother doing what mothers do, putting their children first, even when she was clearly starving herself. Daniel felt memories stirring. 7 years ago, he'd been the one taking care of a child alone, learning on the fly, making mistakes, feeling like he was drowning every single day. After the twins had eaten and begun to relax, curling together on the couch under the blanket with fuller bellies and warmer bodies, Rachel approached Daniel. Up close under the fluorescent lights, he could see her more clearly. Despite the dirt smudged on her face and the exhaustion carved into every line, she had kind eyes, eyes that had clearly cried too many tears recently. "I don't know how to thank you. You didn't have to do this." Daniel shook his head. "Can I ask what happened? You don't have to tell me if you don't want to." Rachel's face crumpled for just a moment before she caught herself, holding the tears back through sheer force of will. She glanced at her daughters, making sure they were far enough away not to hear. "My husband," her voice cracked on the word. "6 months ago, he took out a large loan without telling me. Said it was for a business opportunity, something that would change our lives." She laughed, but it was hollow, broken. He was right about that part. Daniel stayed quiet, letting her find the words. Then he left, ran off with a woman he'd been seeing behind my back, left us with nothing but his debt. The men who came for the money, they took everything. Our house, our car, every penny in our savings account. They didn't care that I didn't sign anything, didn't know about any of it. They just wanted their money. Daniel's jaw tightened, his hands curling around the edge of the bench, knuckles going taut. He abandoned his children. "The shelter we've been staying at is full tonight because of the holiday. We've been waiting outside all evening, hoping a spot would open up, but it's Christmas Eve. Everyone needs somewhere to go tonight." She looked at Daniel, really looked at him, and he saw something in her eyes that he recognized. Shame. The kind of shame that comes from feeling like you failed at the one job that matters most. "I've been applying for jobs everywhere, but no one wants to hire someone with no permanent address. The girls need to be in school, but I can't enroll them without a home. I feel like—" Her voice broke. "I feel like I'm failing them every single day." Daniel understood that feeling. He'd carried it like a weight on his chest for years after Lauren died. The crushing responsibility of being the only thing standing between a child and complete devastation. "Do you have any family?" he asked gently. Rachel shook her head. "My parents passed away when I was young. I was raised by my grandmother, but she died 3 years ago. My husband's family—" She swallowed hard. "They blamed me when he left. Said I must have driven him away." "That's not true," Daniel said firmly. The conviction in his voice surprised even him. "You didn't do anything wrong. He did. He's the one who failed, not you." Rachel stared at him, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. An idea was forming in Daniel's mind, probably not logical, definitely risky, but something about this moment felt bigger than logic. "Listen," he said, making a decision that would change everything. "I have a small house. It's not much, but there's a guest room. You and the girls could stay there, just until you get on your feet." Rachel's eyes went wide. "I can't. We couldn't impose like that. You don't even know us. I know enough. Daniel glanced at her daughters. I know you're a mother trying to protect her children. I know you need help, and I know it's Christmas Eve, and I can't let you go back out into that cold. He paused, and something in his chest loosened, a knot he hadn't realized he'd been carrying for 7 years. I'm a single dad, too, he said quietly. My wife died 7 years ago. I've been raising Ethan alone since he was 3. It's not easy. There were times when I needed help, when I didn't think I could make it through another day. He met Rachel's eyes. Someone gave me a chance when I needed it most. Let me do the same for you. Rachel stared at him like he'd just spoken in a language she didn't understand. Why would you do this? We're strangers. Daniel looked at Ethan, who had both twins laughing now with his silly impressions, his son who had lost his mother but never lost his kindness, who saw people hurting and wanted to help because that's what Daniel had taught him. Because it's the right thing to do, and because nobody should be alone on Christmas. The drive to Daniel's house was quiet. Rachel and the twins were crammed into the back seat with their meager belongings, 2 small backpacks containing a few changes of clothes and a worn stuffed rabbit that Lily clutched like a lifeline. Daniel's mind was racing. What was he thinking? He had a 10-year-old son, a barely there budget, and a house that was already too small for the 2 of them. Now he was bringing home 3 more people. But every time doubt crept in, he remembered Rachel's face in that moment before he'd approached, the way she'd pulled her daughters close, trying to shield them with a body that was already frozen and exhausted. The fierce, desperate love of a parent with nothing left to give except themselves. He knew that feeling. When Lauren had died, Daniel had felt like his entire world had shattered into pieces too small to ever put back together. One moment she'd been laughing, playing with 3-year-old Ethan in their backyard. The next moment, she was on the ground, her face pale, her lips turning blue. Undiagnosed heart condition, the doctors had said later. A congenital defect, a ticking time bomb hiding in her chest since birth. No warning, no chance to prepare, no opportunity to say goodbye. The first year after her death was a blur. Daniel remembered crying in the shower so Ethan wouldn't hear, remembered burning dinner and ordering pizza for the 3rd night in a row, remembered trying to style Ethan's hair using YouTube tutorials and finally asking his neighbor, Mrs. Patel, for help. 7 years of being both mother and father. 7 years of showing up for every parent-teacher conference, every soccer game, every school play. 7 years of being enough even when he felt like he was failing. We're home, Ethan's voice broke through Daniel's thoughts. They were pulling up to the small rental house, a modest 2-bedroom with chipped paint and a front porch that sagged slightly on one side. It wasn't much, but it was home. Rachel stared at the house like it was a mansion. It's perfect, she whispered. Inside, the house was warm and lived in, worn furniture, scuffed floors, a Christmas tree in the corner decorated with handmade ornaments Ethan had crafted in elementary school over the years. The guest room is here, Daniel said, leading them down the narrow hallway. I'll clear out some space tonight. For now, Ethan can sleep on the couch, and you and the girls can take his room. No, please, Rachel protested. We can't take his room. But Ethan was already gathering his favorite stuffed animals from his bed. It's okay. I like camping on the couch, and Grace and Lily need my room more than me tonight. Daniel felt his throat tighten with pride. Later that night, after the twins had fallen asleep in Ethan's bed, their bellies full for the first time in days, Rachel found Daniel in the kitchen. I don't know how to thank you, Rachel said softly. Daniel handed her a mug of tea. You don't have to. Just get some rest. Tomorrow we'll figure out the next steps. There's a hiring manager at the bottling plant where I work who owes me a favor, and I know the principal at the elementary school. We can get the girls enrolled. Rachel's hands shook as she held the warm mug. I'll pay you back. Every cent, I promise. Let's just take it one day at a time, Daniel said gently. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Your wife? What happened? Rachel asked quietly. Daniel felt the familiar ache in his chest, duller now after 7 years, but never fully gone. Heart condition we didn't know about. She was playing with Ethan in the backyard one afternoon. One moment she was laughing, the next she was gone. I'm so sorry, Rachel whispered. Daniel looked at her directly. You have your daughters, and from what I've seen tonight, you're an incredible mother. That man was a fool to leave you. Rachel's eyes filled with tears, but this time she didn't look away. Why are you being so kind to us? Daniel thought about that question, about Lauren's death and the dark year that followed, about Mrs. Patel bringing casseroles every week, about Mr. Lewis at the community center letting them use the facilities for free when money was impossibly tight. Because people were kind to me when I needed it most, and because kindness matters, especially on Christmas Eve. Rachel looked at him, and something passed between them, a recognition of shared pain, shared struggle, shared strength. Merry Christmas, Daniel, Rachel said softly. Merry Christmas, Rachel. Neither of them knew it yet, but something was beginning. Something neither had been looking for, but both desperately needed. Outside, snow began to fall gently over the small Michigan town, covering the streets in white, making everything clean and new again. Christmas morning arrived with the smell of pancakes and the sound of children's laughter, a sound Daniel's house hadn't held in far too long. Ethan had insisted on sharing his new bicycle with the twins, taking turns riding it up and down the hallway while Daniel made breakfast. Rachel appeared in the kitchen doorway, looking more rested than the night before, though her eyes were still shadowed with worry. I can help, she said immediately, moving toward the stove. Please let me help with something. Daniel stepped aside, and they fell into an easy rhythm, him flipping pancakes while she set the table, their movements synchronized in a way that felt natural, comfortable. Over breakfast, Ethan chattered endlessly about his art set and how he was going to teach Grace and Lily to draw dinosaurs. The twins were quiet but watchful, occasionally venturing small comments. They were still scared, still uncertain, but they were warming up. I need to be honest with you, Rachel said after breakfast when the children were occupied in the living room. I don't have much work experience beyond bookkeeping and managing accounts. Before I got married, I ran a small accounting firm, but that was years ago. And after the girls were born, I stayed home. Can you work with numbers? Daniel asked. Yes, I'm actually really good with budgets and financial organization. Daniel felt something click into place. Then I know exactly where you need to work. The bottling plant needs someone in their accounting department. Let me make a call. The days after Christmas blurred together in a strange, unexpected harmony. Daniel called his hiring manager, a no-nonsense black man named Mr. Coleman who owed Daniel several favors. Mr. Coleman agreed to interview Rachel. She got the job within the week. Rachel started in the accounting department, and within 2 weeks she'd reorganized the entire filing system and caught 3 significant errors that had been costing the company money. Mr. Coleman pulled Daniel aside one day at lunch. Where did you find her? She's brilliant. Best hire we've made in years. Daniel felt pride surge through him. Not the kind of pride you feel for yourself, but the deeper kind you feel when someone you care about succeeds. Rachel insisted on contributing to household expenses as soon as her first paycheck arrived. Daniel tried to refuse, but she was stubborn. You've already given us everything, she said firmly. Please let me do this. So they worked out an arrangement. She covered groceries. Daniel handled rent and utilities. They split the rest. The house began to feel different, fuller. The twins' laughter echoed through rooms that had been too quiet for too long. Grace drew pictures that Rachel taped to the refrigerator. Lily sang little songs while coloring at the kitchen table. Ethan thrived having siblings, teaching them games, showing them his favorite books, protecting them like a big brother. Family dinners became routine. Daniel would cook while Rachel helped the kids with homework. They'd sit around the small table talking about their days, making plans for the weekend. Daniel caught himself watching Rachel sometimes, the way she laughed at Ethan's terrible jokes, the way she bit her lip when concentrating on a budget spreadsheet, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was nervous. One evening, they were washing dishes together after dinner. Daniel washing, Rachel drying. Their hands brushed as she reached for a plate, and Daniel felt electricity shoot up his arm. Rachel felt it too. He could tell by the way she froze, her breath catching. "Sorry," Daniel mumbled. "It's okay," she said quietly. But the air between them had shifted, charged with something neither was quite ready to name. 2 months passed. Spring was beginning to push away winter's grip. Rachel and the twins had become permanent fixtures in Daniel's life, in his home, in his routine, in his heart. One Saturday afternoon, Rachel was in the guest room organizing old paperwork, trying to rebuild her credit and make sense of the financial disaster her ex-husband had left behind. Daniel was in the kitchen when he heard her sharp intake of breath. "Daniel?" Her voice was strange. "Daniel, I need to show you something." He found her sitting on the floor, surrounded by old documents, her hands trembling as she held a bank statement. "What is it?" he asked, kneeling beside her. "The loan," she said, her voice shaking. "The loan my husband supposedly took out. Daniel, look at this signature." She showed him the document. The signature was clearly forged. The handwriting didn't match any of Rachel's other signatures on legitimate documents. "He faked it," she whispered. "He committed fraud. I was never legally responsible for any of this debt." Daniel's mind raced. "The men who took your house, your savings, they weren't legitimate. They were probably his friends helping to cover his tracks, making it look real so he could take the money and run." Rachel's voice was growing stronger, anger replacing shock. "I have old text messages, bank statements showing suspicious transfers. I know where he is now. He's living 2 towns over. I saw it on social media before I had to sell my phone." Daniel grabbed her shoulders gently. "We're going to fix this. But Rachel, this isn't just about money. This is fraud." "I don't want lawyers and courts," Rachel interrupted, her eyes fierce. "I want to look him in the face. I want him to know I figured it out. And I want what he stole from my daughters." Daniel saw something in her eyes he hadn't seen before. Strength. Raw, powerful, unbreakable strength. "Then let's go. But I'm coming with you. You're not doing this alone." The drive took 40 minutes. Rachel had found her ex-husband's address through an old mutual friend who didn't know the whole story. The apartment building was run down, paint peeling, the kind of place people ended up when they were running from something. Daniel parked across the street. "Are you sure about this?" Rachel nodded. "I'm sure." They climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, apartment 3C. Rachel knocked, firm, steady, unafraid. The man who answered the door was a black man in his mid-30s, with bloodshot eyes and a face that showed the wear of poor choices. He looked at Rachel, and his face went pale. "Rachel, how did you—" "I know everything, Mark," Rachel said, her voice cold and controlled. "The fake loan, the forged signature, your friends pretending to be collectors, the gambling debts you covered up by destroying your family." Mark's mouth opened and closed. I don't know what you're talking about." Rachel pulled out her folder of documents. "I have bank statements showing transfers to offshore accounts, text messages you forgot to delete, records of your gambling activity, and I have witnesses who will testify that you bragged about your plan." It was a bluff. She didn't have witnesses, but Mark didn't know that. His face crumbled. "Rachel, please, I was desperate. The gambling got out of control and You destroyed your children's lives to cover your mistakes," Rachel said, her voice shaking now with barely controlled rage. "You made them homeless. You made them cold and hungry and scared on Christmas Eve, Mark. Your daughters were begging for food on Christmas Eve while you were living in this apartment, safe and warm." Mark's eyes filled with tears. but they were selfish tears, tears of guilt and shame, not genuine remorse. Daniel stepped forward, unable to stay silent any longer. "You're going to return every penny you stole. Whatever you have left, you're giving it back." "I don't have it all," Mark whimpered. "I lost most of it gambling." "Then you'll give what you have," Rachel said firmly, "and you'll sign a legal document admitting to the fraud. Because if you don't, I'm taking everything I have to every person you know. Your family, your employer, your friends. I'll make sure everyone understands exactly what kind of man you are." Mark looked between them, this woman he'd betrayed and this stranger who stood beside her like a shield. He saw that he had no choice. "Fine," he whispered. I'll get what I have." They left the apartment 20 minutes later with a bank check for $30,000. Not everything Mark had stolen, but enough. And they had a signed confession, properly witnessed by a neighbor Mark had called over. In the car, Rachel sat silently, staring at the check in her hands. Then, suddenly, she started laughing. Not the hollow laugh from before, but real laughter, deep and cathartic, and free. "I can't believe that worked," she gasped between laughs. Daniel found himself laughing too. "You were incredible in there, fierce, powerful. I've never seen anything like it." Rachel's laughter faded, and she turned to look at Daniel. Really look at him. "I couldn't have done it without you, knowing you were there, that I wasn't alone." Daniel pulled the car over to the side of the road, his heart pounding. "Rachel, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "I've been in love with you for weeks, maybe months," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Watching you stand there in that apartment, strong and fearless and brilliant, it made me realize I didn't save you. You saved yourself, but I also realized something else." He took a shaky breath. "I need you, not because you need saving, but because you make my life better. You make Ethan's life better. You make our house feel like a home again. I don't want you to get your own place with that money. I want you to stay. I want us to be a family, a real family." Tears streamed down Rachel's face. "I love you too," Rachel whispered. "I've loved you since that night you made me tea and told me I wasn't failing my daughters. Since you looked at me like I mattered, like I was worth something." "You're worth everything," Daniel said fiercely. Rachel leaned across the console and kissed him. It was tentative at first, then deeper, filled with all the emotion they'd both been holding back for months. 2 years later, the community center was decorated with white flowers and twinkling lights. Daniel stood at the front of the room, wearing a suit Ethan had helped him pick out. His son stood beside him as best man, grinning widely. Mr. Lewis, the elderly night supervisor who'd helped them that first night, stood in front of them holding a small book. "Dearly beloved," he began, his gruff voice surprisingly tender. The doors at the back opened, and Rachel walked in. She wore a simple white dress, her natural hair styled in elegant locks that framed her beautiful brown face. Grace and Lily walked ahead of her as flower girls, scattering petals and giggling softly. Daniel's breath caught. She was beautiful, not just on the outside, but in all the ways that mattered. In her strength, her kindness, her resilience, her love. When Rachel reached him, she took his hands, and Daniel saw tears shimmering in her eyes. "We're here today," Mr. Lewis continued, "to celebrate the joining of two families who found each other when they needed it most, to celebrate the love that grew from kindness, to celebrate second chances and new beginnings." "I do," Daniel said when prompted. His voice strong and certain. "I do," Rachel echoed, tears streaming down her face. "Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Daniel pulled Rachel close and kissed her as Ethan, Grace, and Lily cheered. The small gathering of friends and co-workers applauded. Mr. Lewis wiped his eyes with a handkerchief. That night, at their wedding reception, held in the same community center where they'd first met, Daniel stood to give a toast. 2 years ago, he began, I thought I was just helping a stranger on Christmas Eve. I thought I was just doing the right thing, offering warmth and food and shelter to a mother and her children who needed it. He looked at Rachel, who was watching him with such love, it made his chest ache. But the truth was that the moment I saw Rachel protecting her daughters, I recognized something in her. I recognized myself. I recognized strength and love and determination. He paused, his voice growing thick with emotion. The truth was that in trying to help her, she helped me. She brought light back into a house that had been dark for too long. She gave Ethan siblings. She gave me a reason to believe in love again. Daniel raised his glass. The truth that stunned me was that sometimes broken things can be made more beautiful than they were before. That love finds you when you're busy being kind. That family isn't always about blood. It's about showing up day after day for the people who matter. Everyone raised their glasses. To Rachel, Daniel said. To second chances. To finding home in the most unexpected places. To family, Rachel added softly. To family, everyone echoed. As the party continued around them, Daniel pulled Rachel close, swaying gently to the music. Ethan was teaching Grace and Lily how to do a silly dance, and their laughter filled the room. Thank you, Rachel whispered against Daniel's chest, for seeing me when I was invisible, for giving us a home when we had nowhere to go, for loving my daughters like they're your own. Daniel tilted her chin up so he could see her face. Thank you for taking a chance on a stranger, for letting me into your life, for making our family complete. They kissed softly as snow began to fall outside, just like it had that first Christmas Eve. Daniel thought about that night 2 years ago, about the 3 figures huddled against the cold, about the decision to offer help instead of looking away, about how one small act of kindness had transformed into something bigger than he'd ever imagined. Sometimes the greatest miracles come from the simplest choices. Sometimes saving someone else is exactly how you save yourself. And sometimes, on a frozen Christmas Eve, when you open your heart to a stranger, you find exactly what you've been missing all along.